Hi all, I'm Dan Smigrod, founder of the We Get Around Network Forum. Today is Thursday, April 19th, 2018, and you're watching WGAN TV live at 5. We have a super great show for you today. Really excited. We're talking to the folks at CUPIX, C-U-P-I-X, CUPIX.com, and it's kind of the intersection of CUPIX meets architects, engineering, and construction in the AEC space. I've had just a chance to get a sneak preview. All I can tell you is magical. That's what you're about to see is magic, as CUPIX takes us through 3D tour compared in a split screen panel to different points of time in a split screen view versus a Revit 3D BIM model. So super excited. Our guests in the studio today, we have Scott. Scott is the CUPIX Director of Sales. Scott, good to see you again, your third time on our show.
Thank you for having me and us, Dan, again. It's always great to be here.
You bet. And you've brought with you CUPIX Head of Product Strategy, Paul Collart. Paul, good to see you.
Good seeing you.
And I know you're not a stranger to We Get Around Network Forum members. Regular readers will know that I want to say you wrote something like a 40-page compare and contrast all the different 3D tour platforms that are of interest to those in the real estate space. So, subsequently from that, I think you now ended up at CUPIX. So very, very exciting.
Great. Thanks.
Scott, Paul, where would you like to begin? You want to give us a demo in this AEC space?
Yeah, I could start off. We'd like to present a little bit of background on CUPIX, a little bit of what we've done, just really briefly, and then I get into maybe a more in-depth introduction of Paul and some of his motivations and getting involved with CUPIX and what he brings to the table, and then let him have at it on some of the basic stuff and just take it from there. So I'd like to share my screen if I could.
Sure.
All right, so just to get started, I want to remind everybody what CUPIX brings to the table from a technology perspective. There's a couple of videos on CUPIX that are on the We Get Around forum, and there's plenty of topics and articles that you can find around the web and on the forum. But this serves as a nice little overview of what CUPIX does. Basically, we're focusing on 360 photos and 360 camera data. You can get cameras at Amazon, delivered to you overnight. Just the other day, I was in the Apple store and I needed a camera. I picked up a camera at the Apple store, unboxed it, took some photos at the Apple store, generated a 3D tour at the Apple store. It's kind of cool that you could do that. You can also find cameras at the Microsoft store and Fry's Electronics. So you got a lot of cameras around, and the 360 photo format's becoming more and more prominent. So
yeah, I would just add here that the magic of CUPIX is that you can use any 360 camera to create 3D tours. And whether that's a $130 solution or a $10,000 or $20,000 or more solution, there's a 360 camera at your price point that magically works with the CUPIX platform to create a 3D tour.
Yeah, the Apple store was selling the Insta-1 camera, and it's pretty amazing that you can latch it onto a bullet and spin it around and just make this awesome effect, like you're just in a real action environment. So I think a lot of the consumerism is being driven by action photography, but the optics are great, the hardware is great, and you can get them anywhere for a wide variety of prices. And that's what we're going to be focusing on the AEC webinar today. But getting back to CUPIX, starting with any 360 camera data, you just take the photos, and CUPIX is going to automatically figure out the image overlap. So there's a couple of photos of a residential setting. It's got some nice wood floors, nice ceiling. You just take a couple dozen photos, and you can generate a tour of space.
And for clarity, when Scott talks about photos, he's talking about a 360 photo.
Correct. The 360 cameras create 360 photos. Thank you, Dan. And from there, we're going to run through an image processing pipeline. So we'll process the images, figure out overlap between photos, automatically generate a 3D model with a texture mapped surface. And all of this, this buildup can be used for visualization of a space, so you can get views from any perspective with 360 photos. And we'll be looking at that quite some depth as we go through this in an AEC environment. So construction, facility management, and other areas. We're using some pretty heavy computation on the back end to make this happen. The results are a 3D tour, and once you have that tour available, you can do a walkthrough, just like you would expect to do with Google Street View or Matterport. You can jump from panel location to panel location and walk through the space, and we're automatically establishing connectivity. And if there's a panel location on the other side of the wall, for example, or on the other side of a wall, we're going to control the connectivity so that you're not able to jump through walls. So we're creating a really smart, intelligent environment with 3D walls and the ability to control where you're walking along the path. So a really nice VR environment that's created with CUPIX. The 2D sketch is automatically generated. We're calling this the auto-generated 2D sketch of the tour. And what you can see is we've got sketched in lines from the walls, sketched in lines from the bar. So instead of taking a single cross section, we're actually doing something a lot more depth to get these walls that can be used for working with alignment, working with understanding how walking paths take place and getting a really clear understanding of the overall look and size of a space. So you can see the panel locations, you can see the etched in black lines. That's really more than just a single cross section. There's a lot of information there that becomes available once you create the CUPIX store. From there, we can also, we're also generating a 3D mesh. So what you're seeing here is the top ceiling of the mesh. You can also see some of the walls and the bottom of the mesh. And this is great for conceptual awareness of the size of the mesh. But in this webinar, it's not really a focus of CUPIX. The mesh is helpful for taking a couple of measurements here and there, but not really used and leveraged beyond aligning the mesh data to a floor plan or the mesh data to other objects that we're going to be looking at and Paul's going to be going over. But we do have this model, which makes it very helpful to align the mesh to floor plans and have an overall sense of the size and the scale of the 3D tour. So that's kind of the back and forth of CUPIX. And what I'm going to show here before I hand it over to Paul, who's got some really amazing stuff to tell and explain, is I've got a couple of examples that I wanted to go through for everybody. And this is an example of working through a CUPIX model. So this is an end result of a CUPIX model. What we did is we took about 100 or so photos of the top floor and the bottom floor. And sorry, one second.
And for our viewers, I just want to point out that because of the magic of how we do our TV show, there is some latency in what we're seeing, but there isn't any latency when you do this in person with it. So just the challenge of three people and being all together and doing a demo, there's some latency as Scott goes through and does his demo.
All right, thank you. All right, so what we're looking at here is a completed tour. So this is the end result of the tour. And we have a floor plan that's being shown. So you can navigate to any area on the floor plan. You can navigate within the location, and you can see this is a residential construction, something that's in progress. We can navigate down to the ground floor, or the basement rather, and take a look.
That's a residence?
Yeah, it's a one-story residence with a basement, and
okay,
just about 2,000 square feet, so a pretty small space. And we can navigate anywhere we'd like to see different areas of the model and different areas of the tour. We can introduce some of these 3D objects into the tour, pins. But this is basically what you get out of CUPIX. And the way that you can get there, like I was describing, is you upload photos. So you can upload 44 photos of the basement, for example.
Okay, again, upload photos means upload 360 photos from a 360 camera. Okay.
Thank you. And actually, the terminology that we've decided to use, I'm misusing it, as panos. So you can actually upload panos.
Okay.
Panos help you locate where you are. So you can also upload panos from the ground or outside, and those all are used to construct a tour. So that's how it works. The photos go up. You immediately have a layout that you can look at, and in this layout, you've got a floor plan that you can align to. I'm going to hide the floor plan. You can see that you've got a mesh, and then the cross sections that can really easily help you align the sections to the tour data to one another. So if you're working on the top first floor or the basement, it's quite easy to line up the created tour to an existing floor plan, and that's showing a real example of, albeit a residential space, and Paul's going to get into some much bigger areas in a moment. So that's a quick intro to CUPIX, and what I'd like to do now is just show a slide with some graphic work that I like to do with Paul, because he's really out and about collecting a lot of content for CUPIX. And in introducing him, I took some photos of Paul while he was collecting data at a construction site in San Francisco. So you can see the beautiful view over there. But we like to kind of work with his head, work with his helmet, work with the graphics a little bit, because he's collecting a lot of the construction and facilities work and doing a lot of the prove out for CUPIX. So Paul is the head of product strategy at CUPIX, and he is also the author of the 45-page Compare VR platforms that exist on the We Get Around network. So
yes, first published on the We Get Around network blog, and it's available free to any We Get Around network forum member. Just private message me if you'd like that 45-page guide.
Yeah, and I'd like to hand it over to Paul, because Paul has been quite active for a lot of the history of CUPIX. Having recently joined the company, he thought that'd be great to explain his motivations for coming on board. So I'd like to hand it over to you, Paul, and talk a little bit about why you're here.
Paul, you're looking super geeky with that 360 my camera on top of your hard hat there. I think you still have we still have you on mute there, Paul.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
Let's get someone
looking
more...
super geeky there.
Yeah.
But I can't wait to have that look myself. So yeah. I hope you all will send us the mount that you're using to add that little selfie pole to that
absolutely
hard hat.
Actually,
yeah.
I have it sitting right here.
Yeah. I want that so badly.
We need to pick someone a little more photogenic, Scott. So anyway,
yeah.
Again, thanks, Dan. And a little history. Dan, it was about 1.5 years ago I reached out to you. I was researching AEC technologies, had questions about Matterport, and I kind of mentioned to you. I was kind of testing residential real estate tours, 3D tours for AEC. Mentioned I had a whole bunch of tours in my house, and you're like, hey, why don't you write an article? And I was like, okay. And I really didn't know what I was getting into. It was a lot of work.
It was a massive undertaking. I don't think any trade journal would ever do as deep a dive that you did, which, thank you, was absolutely phenomenal.
And I don't mind the technical, but then I had to write something, and that's just not my strength. So now the one thing is, my wife was a fan of it, because I have, she'd come home at the end of the day from work and the house is cleaned up. And she'd be like, did you do a 3D tour today? I go, yeah. I'm so happy I would clean the house. Maybe clean, tidy is maybe a better word. So, but really my motivation on it was researching technologies that can be extended to AEC and improve processes in AEC. And a lot of what I've been researching over the last couple of years is kind of the entire life cycle of buildings, and a A lot of times it starts in commercial real estate, for example. Again, commercial, not residential, but starts with commercial real estate, and maybe they need to market the space. So obviously a 3D tour could help with that. But then it's looking at how can this information be carried throughout the entire life cycle. So from there, a tenant might be interested in a space. Maybe they need to do test fits. Is this space going to work for them? And if they pick a space, maybe then they're going into the architectural process, and they're going to do tenant improvements, or they need to remodel the space for their specific needs. Then you go into the architectural process, the space planning, schematic design, design development, to construction, and then in the construction process, and then it gets handed over to the building owner or tenant, and it's this constant life cycle of this information. And today, information is lost all the time, and I've been just really interested in how can we improve that, help with the information, storage of the information, and make it useful over time. And so that was really my motivation. And the nice thing about writing this article, I met a lot of great people, a lot of great companies out there. And Simon, the CEO of CUPIX, reached out, and I included him on that article. And I've been in touch with him since a year and a half ago. And we'd get together every month and we talk about what's going on. And I kept kind of pushing him into the AEC direction, and where they weren't originally doing those types of things. And then 6 months ago, we started maybe meeting more often. And then in November, he was showing me all these things that I'd been suggesting to him, and kind of decided at that point, well, maybe Simon, it's a good time where you could actually pay me now for some of these ideas. And it's been great. So it's working with a team that's really making things fast. It's amazing. The life cycle of the development is it's really fast, and it's really exciting. So there's a lot of things going on, a lot of things we have planned to do. So with that, and one of the things with comparing residential real estate tours and then getting into commercial, and I've had a lot of conversations with different people about this, is once you get into commercial, a lot of times labor is your biggest cost, because you're going from working on houses that are 1,300 square feet, like my little house, to houses that, maybe if you're lucky, you have a 10,000 square foot house. But then when you start getting into commercial, you're talking offices that are 10,000, 25,000, 100,000 square feet, millions of square feet. And when it comes to, and many of the software providers I've talked to, they really didn't care about labor. It just wasn't a factor. But when you want to go capture 1 million square feet, labor is your biggest cost. And so a lot of what I've been pushing is, how can we capture this really fast, so that, again, your labor is your biggest cost. I need to do it as fast as possible. And I'm actually going to bring up a graphic I created. Oh, helps to share my screen though. Can you see my screen there?
Yes.
And what I did was I took some numbers, and again, we have a lot of Matterport people here. So I used, you could capture a Matterport tour, let's say at 2,500 square feet an hour. And again, a lot of this really depends on the space.
And I think that's a lot. Matterport would probably say they could do more than that, but for me, scanning residential, I think it's about 1,000 square feet an hour. I think if you're in a commercial space and you're not getting behind the sofa and the couch, maybe it's faster. But you still even at 2,500 square feet an hour, that's probably being generous to Matterport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, and so what I've done is I've compared kind of a size of a project with time. Mm-hmm. And what I'm doing is the yellow line is showing what we call using interval photos. I'll explain that here in a second. And then another option we have is to actually go and take video of the site. So interval photos. Now, one of the things when you're dealing in AEC, facilities management in these types of spaces, you're not as concerned about being in the photo. And what you'll see in some of the examples we show you, a lot of times I just wear that I wear this construction hat. And really what you see when you look down, you just see the top of the helmet. And again, it's your biggest issue is I need to capture this as fast as possible. And so having to get out of the shot is really a big waste of time when it comes to AEC and facilities. Now, interval photos is a lot of the 360 cameras you have now have this mode called interval photos, where it will automatically take photos, say every 2 seconds, 4 seconds, 8 seconds. And what it does is it makes it very easy for a user to just enable the mode, put your phone in your pocket, and walk the space. And it's literally take the picture, it beeps at you, you take a 3-4 casual steps, you stop, stand still, take a picture. And it's a repeat over and over and over again. And again, it depends upon the type of space. I have spaces where, it took 15,000, I'm getting 15,000 square feet per hour, but I have other spaces where it could be 100,000 square feet per hour. And if you're talking in really open areas. And then the other option is with video. And more often than not, I'm actually using time-lapse video. So again, most of the cameras support that, but as opposed to taking 30 frames a second for video, go through and take 2 frames a second. And what that does is it really makes the file more manageable. So, you're getting a file that's 15 times smaller than a video created with 30 frames a second. So it becomes much easier to load that over the internet or copy it and those types of things. If you have a really long video, I got to load 2 gigs of data. It takes forever to do that. So we're encouraging a lot of people to do it with time-lapse video. So again, the graphic here is just showing as the space gets larger, what you'll find are terrestrial systems, be it Matterport, be it your HD laser scanning. It really, again, your labor becomes your biggest issue. So,
if you just go back to that slide, because this slide is actually so important. When you look at this slide, you clearly, when you define how much space can be captured using Matterport or using a 360 video camera or a 360 camera that shoots interval and or a 360 camera that's shooting video or video with time lapse. If you look at what you have, which again, I think is generous towards Matterport to say 2,500 square feet an hour versus being able to do 40,000 square feet, that's mind-boggling that now CUPIX using videogrammetry is able to use the video in order to do 40,000 square feet in an hour. It's like crazy insane. To me,
it will show you examples of this, but there's trade-offs between interval photos versus video. So your quality isn't going to be quite as good. Again, just as the nature of video. So again, it's a trade-off, and we have examples of the same space captured with both methods, and we can show you what the difference looks like.
But what I'm hearing from you, Scott, is if you're shooting interval, you essentially are shooting a 360 photo, and the quality is going to be better than the video. So even at the interval shooting, there's a 10 times faster way to capture content.
Correct. Yeah.
And probably at 1/10 the cost. Because I want to say, Scott, you were talking about the Insta360 one camera. I have one of those, very happy with it. I want to say, I don't know, maybe it's 350, maybe it's less now.
Yeah, it's a little less. We're really catering to the action market, and the amount of money that an action photographer has is in the GoPro range or small camera range. So
but even if you're saying, hey, I want to experiment with CUPIX, I want to get started for a Insta360 one camera, you're off and running, and you have the choice of interval shooting or video shooting is in 360. Paul, sorry to delay you here, but I just thought this slide just speaks volumes.
And Paul, you're going to cover some of the cameras that you're using. So I think the audience will be surprised with the camera we actually recommend for a lot of these large spaces.
Yeah. And so actually with that, Scott, I think I was going to pass it over to you really quick.
Yeah, I think I'm going to show one more thing just to
Paul, you started to show another slide where
I didn't mean to do that. So,
okay.
Here, I'm gonna stop my share really quick.
Scott
Scott
can pick it up. Yeah.
Okay, here you are. And what I'm going to do is just expand a little bit more on this same example, but show a couple of different types of comparisons that you can do, or a couple different types of measurements that you can, cameras that you can use rather. And what we have is really high-end camera, full frame, Sony camera with a panoramic head. So really kind of the best quality photo that you can get. And right next to it, we have point and shoot type of camera, the same camera that was pictured on top of Paul's head in the earlier slide. But with this, with these two cameras loaded inside of CUPIX, what you're able to see is a comparison of the cameras side by side. So
which one's on the left?
On the left, we are looking actually at the Sony.
Okay. Oh, I see. And then the MySphere is on the right.
And the MiSphere, yeah, MySphere, Xiaomi MiSphere is on the right.
Xiaomi easy for you to say. Thank you. Xiaomi MiSphere.
MiSphere, right.
Okay.
So we can take these photos pretty quickly using a tripod. Paul's going to get into a much faster way of collecting the photos. But even at its lowest price point, really, you've got an HDR image, so you can see none of the windows are blown out. You've got a lot of detail between both cameras, and I think we are experiencing some lag just with the video data. But you get a lot of detail, a lot of information from this really low cost camera.
Again, that's WGAN TV live stream that's has the latency of doing your demo there. Yeah.
Okay.
And I should point out that company we helped with that was a company called Bone Structure, and they're kind of doing some very innovative things in residential construction. They do design build, and they're doing a lot of the construction, doing prefab construction. So it's all with metal construction, and it's probably why you questioned, is this really a residential?
Yeah, I've never seen a residential that had.
It's pretty amazing. They come out and everything is just brought out on a truck, and all they do is assemble it. So everything's done in Revit. They do everything with, prefabrication of everything.
Cool.
It's pretty amazing.
It's cool.
Okay, and then another type of camera that Paul will get into quite a bit more, is lapse handheld camera. So what we're seeing to now is cameras that were mounted on a tripod. This is a camera that's being used in an unlit basement, so we can see side by side the camera performance in an unlit basement versus a camera that's mounted on a tripod. And even in a completely unlit area, you're able to get great detail. You're able to figure out exactly where you are in a spot, and if you wanted to navigate anywhere within the tour, you can do that easily, either with a floor plan or using the virtual navigation that we're doing here. So some really good, impressive performance that you can get from these consumer action cams these days. So that's an example of that. And then the other thing that I wanted to show here is, bear with me, I had to set up two screens to get the
If you're just tuning in, you're watching WGAN TV live at 5. Our guests today, Scott Anderson and Paul Collart with CUPIX. I've promised magic, and I know this for many, this is probably magic just watching what you're doing, but I think there's like incredible magic that I've had a chance to preview last week, and I just can't wait for Paul and Scott to get to that, because it's like, oh, it'll just blow you away. It's really exciting.
All right, and here we go. I got it on screen, so thank you. This will take only minute to load, and or a couple seconds to load. And what we're looking at is a comparison of a E360 camera. This is with taken with the video. This is one that you can get at the Microsoft store. They don't sell it at the Apple store. And what's being shown is, again, a side-by-side view.
So I'm still seeing the screen paint. Perhaps Paul could do that demo. So I know you're in two different. Now it's loading. There we go. Okay, great.
All right, so we've got a video.
You want to make that full screen for us?
I could. Yeah, does that help?
Okay.
Okay, so we've got a side-by-side view, and we're looking at video capture. And on the left, we've got the actual tour. And then on the right, we've got a BIM model. We are calculating 3D locations of all of the photos and all of the complete tour, whether the camera is at a high position or low position. We know exactly where that camera location is. We can coordinate the actual model versus the BIM model. So
let's pause there for a moment, Scott. So what we're looking at, and I think you have a slider so you can make the one side bigger or smaller. So is there a slider there?
Yeah.
Between the two? Yeah. So what we're looking at on the left is the 3D tour. What we're looking at the right is the BIM model that the architect visualized. My question is for, I think for Paul, is why is that important, and to whom is that important?
Are you able to hear me? I might be
yes.
muted. Okay, sorry. And I apologize. I'm not feeling all that great, so I'm have a lot of coughing going on. Actually, Dan, let's actually go to my next demo and talk about that maybe in a little bit more detail.
Okay.
I have some other projects, and you might have seen that house. That's my house. So I guess you can call me the architect on that one. But I have some more. Again, this is residential, and what I wanted to do is get into commercial spaces.
Okay.
Yes, let me hand it over. That's a perfect time to hand it over to you. So,
okay.
Yeah, we got that question covered, Dan.
Okay.
Set up today.
So let's see.
Stop your sharing.
Scott, if you can stop sharing, and then Paul will be able to share. Okay, now Paul can share. Yep.
So you can see my screen there?
Yep. It's on fire.
Okay. So what I wanted to talk about was a couple different markets, specifically for kind of where we're targeting. And the first one I'm going to talk about is I'm kind of lumping them all together, but I'm calling it commercial real estate, architecture, facilities management. And really what the goal, more so for architecture and facilities management, is to be able to visit the site at any time from your desktop. So if you're an architect, you're redesigning a space, and there's always that time where, oh, I forget someplace in that building and I need to design something or see that condition. They have the ability through their desktop to get there at any time. And what I'm going to do is load up just a couple examples that are used by architects on live projects. And actually what I'm going to do is go to the site first. And so this architect based in Mountain View, California, needed to reconstruct the shell of this building. They didn't have any as-built for this. And they also need, again, they're only working on one suite that is located in this one location. But when you go to submit for approval through the city, you have to have the entire site on there, all the parking, handicap, all that information. So what happened was we created a 3D tour of the site. So if you look on here, again, we just used a picture of Google Earth. Think of it as Google Street View for construction projects. But you can see all the panos where you can pretty much go anywhere on this site and look and see the conditions. And notice if you look down, you're seeing the helmet right there. And so depends how you want to walk. You can walk through, or you can go to any pano. And again, it's just used for visual documentation of the site. And I've worked with architects on many projects like this, and sometimes it's pulling teeth to get feedback. And this one architect, I've known them a very long time, and I can periodically go into the office and I'll walk around and I see people with CUPIX on their desktop, and I talk to them and pin them down, and they're like, oh no, I'm in it almost daily. Every day I have it up. So they're using it even more during their design process and when they're doing design, construction documents, and so on. So it's become very invaluable during that process. And if I go to, we actually captured the roof also. And really it was, they're working on this side of the building, but now if they need to do anything with mechanical, they're going to have a information here as to potentially where you could locate those on the roof, depending upon the requirements inside a specific suite.
Paul, and I just want to point out, because it may be a little bit hard to see for our viewers to see, but you have two ways to, or at least three ways. You're walking by going from scan point to scan point, but you have the ability to click on any point within your mini map in the bottom left. And then I also see a pull up, pull down menu where it says roof.
Yeah, so this is, think of it as like a level selector, like you see in Matterport.
Yeah.
But it doesn't necessarily need to be a level. You know, one's the site, one's the roof, one's a specific suite. And, you know, the navigation, I can click anywhere in a certain direction, kind of like Google Street View. It's hard to see the arrows because I have such a white background, but there's also arrows here you can navigate.
The good news is Simon's probably watching this, making a note right now of what to do when
what to do with a white background.
A white background.
And then you can zoom in and out of the plan. There's also buttons here, and then at any time, just hey, I want to go over here.
Yep. Okay, great. Thank you.
And then lastly, I'll go to the suite. So here's the suite they're going to remodel. And again, just your typical 3D tour, walking through, zoom in and go to a certain point. So this was actually a lab at one point. So a perfect example of architects, and kind of also goes to facilities management. And I'll load another example. If anyone's been in the San Francisco Bay Area and seen a concert, you've maybe been to Shoreline Amphitheater. And this was actually more for facilities management for Live Nation to be able to see their spaces. And management is all over the world. So again, this was a small sample, but if we go over to, let's say, the other side of the cafe, they have the ability to walk through that cafe, and we do have a reference floor plan. And another thing I should point out is this was done with time-lapse video. And this was an early version of our time-lapse video, and you'll see on the floor plan, it's very easy to see kind of the path that you walk through that space. And I mean, this was probably done 3 months ago, and a lot has been done with the algorithms to figure out how should we display those panos. So in some cases, we're showing a lot of panos, but they're doing a lot of work to improve that. And then when you get into facilities management or even in architecture, bathrooms are really important, and that bathroom is not looking too good right there. But a lot of times you need to know.
But the guy in the mirror is.
Yeah, there I am. A lot of times you need to know, are bathrooms up to code? You know, do I need to upgrade those bathrooms to ADA standards, American Disabilities Act standards? So a lot of times when you're in these types of situations, more detail, the better. So more pictures, the better. So, and then we have other areas of, so they could remotely check out the concession tents. They could actually walk through the bar. Here, I'm going to go through the bar there. And I've never been in that bar, let me tell you. Okay, I've been there a couple times, but another example in, did I have another commercial real estate? Oh, and then I had one for talking about commercial real estate. And this was used by a commercial real estate broker to have people be able to remotely walk the space. And this gives you an idea on speed. This was about 37,000 square feet. We used interval photos with a Measphere camera, and the nice thing about the Measphere is it takes 7K photos, so it takes pretty high resolution photos, and 37,000 square feet was captured in 65 minutes.
Crazy.
So if you do the math on that, it's about 28,000 square feet an hour.
Very exciting.
And so again, you have your reference map. You can go anywhere you want. And the range, I'd mentioned a range of about 15,000 square feet to 100,000 square feet. What you'll find is there's a lot of cubicles, a lot of private offices. It's going to take a little longer to capture that space, and that's what you're seeing here. And this commercial real estate broker is one of the things I'm trying to encourage commercial real estate brokers is this information can be helpful in the next phase of whoever takes this building or rents this building. If they go through a tenant improvement or remodel, this information, the commercial real estate broker,
let me ask you this, Paul, before you go into the use cases, do you have the demo that I looked at last week?
The construction demo?
Yeah, because
we're going to get to that.
You're going to get to that?
Yep.
Okay.
So it's I'm trying to encourage commercial real estate brokers or building owners to, with the 3D tours, this information can be passed off to the next phase of this building, which could be a tenant improvement. So the architect could use this information, and then everybody on the design team, mechanical, electrical, space planning for furniture, all this can be used by everyone on this design team to physically walk the space from your browser. So that's one of the things we're really trying to encourage people to use the system for. So those were a couple use cases on architecture, facilities management, commercial real estate. So what I wanted to do, and actually this is also something that I captured that exact same space in time-lapse video that I was going to show you. Again, what you'll find is the quality isn't quite as good. But with this space, actually I had the info up, captured the same space in 35 minutes.
About half the time. So
55,000 square feet an hour to capture 37,000 square feet. I thought I had set up.
And so for clarification, that is time-lapse video rather than interval shooting.
That's correct, yes.
Okay.
And it was taken with about a setting of 0.5 seconds or take 2 frames a second.
Okay, and that one you used a Yi 360 camera.
Correct.
Okay.
And what's can you share the resolution of the Yi 360? Was it 5.7?
I think so.
5.7K.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of video.
So still very high resolution.
So then what I wanted to do is get into construction, and some of the features we've created, very specific to construction, is really to enable, again, the whole project team to be able to walk the construction site from, again, your desktop. So anybody involved in that project could have access to that. Now, before I get to the sample we showed you, Dan, this is one we did just last week. And this is our first scan of it, but we'll be doing 3D tours of this maybe every couple weeks to get a progress status. And actually the info would, I don't have the info stated in here, but this is 5 floors, including a basement and a roof. And it's about 120,000 square feet. And the time, if you were to equate that and how fast we captured it, it was just under 50,000 square feet an hour to capture this. So we were on site about
using which technique?
This was using interval photos with a Measphere at 7K resolution.
And you have to tell me the amount of time you spent in the building again.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours.
120,000 square feet.
2.5 hours, 120,000 square feet, 5 floors plus a rooftop.
Correct.
So just by comparison, if I was shooting that space with Matterport, even if I could shoot it with Matterport, because there's some limitations on processing and how it's displayed. I want to say
fairly open. It's fairly open inside also.
10. It would take me at least 12 full days to shoot that with Matterport, if that was possible for me personally to shoot that space. And I would say that the folks at Matterport would say, oh, no, you're so far off. Even if it's half that time, we're still talking about 6 days versus 2.5 hours.
Yeah.
So
yeah. It becomes a whole thing I was mentioning is labor is your biggest cost.
Labor. Yeah. So this is, I mean, and again, we still haven't exactly gotten to the magic that I promised at the top of the hour.
Yeah.
But even that, for someone who is seeing this for the first time, is to say, you can create a 3D tour of 120,000 square feet in 2.5 hours. With a 360 camera that shoots 7.5K, I think I heard.
It's 25 megapixels for the viewers. 25 megapixel.
25 megapixel.
Photo. Yeah.
And that's using interval shooting for an audience that actually doesn't care about necessarily the HDR type imagery.
Correct. Yeah, exactly. And again, we're in the basement. It's dark, but you can still make things out. And it is an active construction site. So you're working around people. And sometimes there's certain areas you can't get into. So for example, this is the bottom of an atrium. Just can't get into that area.
Can't walk into it. Okay. But your geometry doesn't collapse just because you're missing that piece.
Correct. Yes.
Okay.
So, and what you'll find, there are some features in the system to automatically blur faces. So he's already blurry because he's actually walking through the space. But if you get closer to people on certain tours, they're automatically blurred out. So we do have some machine learning it built into the system to be able to do that. And we do have some features in the editor such that you can edit the photos dynamically. I'm not in the editor, I'm in the public facing player, but in the editor, I could go up to this and just blur his face automatically right in the editor. Or if you had a license plate, or you have an office with confidential information on whiteboards, you could just blur it all out. So. And again, that's built in right into the editor to be able to do that. So again, you just switch between your floors, pretty easy, same navigation as before. And notice you're seeing floor plans. When you're dealing with construction projects, you have floor plans. So a lot of this is aligning the CUPIX model to the floor plan. And what I'm going to show on the next project is then it takes one step further. We can align the CUPIX model to the floor plans, but also to the BIM model. And so I'm going to load up this project in downtown San Francisco. And so this was captured April 6th. And again, same thing. You have again, this is very similar to the others, and you can see this is a very active construction site. We're seeing metal studs getting in place, and as you walk this space, here, let's go over to an open area here, and they're actively putting in mechanical ducting. So sometimes it gets a little crazy in that you have to walk around areas that, again, areas you just can't, I can't walk through the mechanical ducting. So you do what you can. But this is being used by the construction team, the general contractors, architects, mechanical, electrical contractors, so that they can see what's going on the site. And we also have we're doing the top 2 floors of this building, so I can go down a floor to the 13th floor. And again, inspect this site, again, navigate through the panos directly on the floor plan.
How important is that mini map and showing orientation to the users of this
It's
content?
very important because everybody working on the site understands the floor plan and they're used to the floor plan. So if I'm here and I want to get to that other side of the building, it's very difficult to walk through the entire site. Much easier just to say, I know exactly where I want to be, go there. And again, we're spatially accurate. So notice the pano in the mini map is showing you the exact orientation that you're on. Now, also what I wanted to show is, part of the setup of this is aligning the CUPIX model to the floor plans, but then we can also bring in the BIM model. And so if I go to compare, and actually one step further, actually before I get to compare of the BIM model, what we're able to do is we're able to compare different time slices of the same construction site from the same location.
So, so this is the first piece of magic that I was thinking we were going to see in today's program. So I'm very excited to see this because when you start moving, so are we a couple weeks apart from what was shot on the left versus the right?
So if you look on the bottom here, this side was captured April 6th, and this side was captured March 21st.
And while you're moving April 6th, or while and I presume you could move either one, the other moves simultaneously.
Correct. Yes.
So we're literally seeing the progress of about 2 weeks difference on this job site. And it's not like I have to figure out how to move the picture simultaneously. The magic here is that the left side and the right side it's moving automatic.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about why this progress? So imagine that I'm a 3D tour photographer. I'm shooting residential. I'm thinking about commercial construction, architects, etc. Who cares about this progress?
I mean, everybody on the project team. And what this will eventually get passed off to is the building owner. And one of the things we haven't talked about is that we do have a CUPIX export so that you can archive this and then play it on any desktop, Mac or Windows.
Whoa, that's exciting.
And so handoff to the building owner is, here was the entire construction process. And what that's going to help with is the next tenant that moves into this space, let's say 5 years from now, they're going to have a record of what's behind those walls.
Let's go a little bit slower. Let's begin at the beginning. So I'm an architect. Why might I look at this progress?
Well, you'll find with architects are always involved with construction administration. So as soon as the design's done, the architect and pass over the drawings to the contractor, they're still involved during the entire construction process. And there's change requests going on constantly, because you get into the field, there's issues you just can't come across. And the architect needs to make changes to the model, to the plans. And what this does is it enables the architect to see exactly what's going on. They don't need to, the architect is in Mountain View. This building is in San Francisco. Depending upon the time of day, it could take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours to drive to this site. This is much easier for those architects. What
was the architect doing previously to having this kind of solution, or what are they doing today without this solution?
I mean, they would maybe take a photo and send the photo, but you always have the issue of, I didn't take enough photos, I didn't take the right photos, not enough coverage of those photos. And again, we're finding that they're in here all the time now.
And how do the construction engineering people, what's the benefit to them of having this progress?
It's really for the people managing the construction projects. So the project managers that aren't necessarily there day to day. Your laborers are there doing the mechanical, electrical, doing the kind of the hard work of what needs to be done in the site, and they can see progress. They can see what's happening. It's without going on site. So a lot of terms they'll use, or even the higher ups at the tenant that's going to see this, they want to do an executive walkthrough of the space. They want to see the status. They want to make sure it's moving forward.
So, and how often does that happen? That the person who is the company that is leasing or buying a space want to physically walk through?
It really just depends on the client. And also on construction sites, it really depends how often they want to take, create a 3D tour to capture the construction project in time. Again, it really
I could imagine that the owner of that space could be, it's being built in one city, the architect is in a different city, the owner of the building is in a different city, and the company that's leasing that space is in yet a different city.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So
and I would imagine in the past what that might have meant, a lot of airline tickets and hotel rooms and maybe even construction pausing, perhaps as large tour groups come through of owners or owners or of the building or people who are going to lease the space. So construction people are having to stop in order to give a tour.
Exactly. Yeah. It's
so I just wonder if, as when we think about as photographers and we want to pitch business to architects and engineers and construction space, that this kind of compare the 3D tour 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, 5 weeks ago may simply be less expensive and less expensive than people flying in and giving people time back. The architect is not taking a half a day or a day to drive through San Francisco traffic in order to do an inspection that could probably be done in 2 minutes of whatever key discussion everybody was having.
Exactly. And a lot of it is, I talked before about architects using it for visual documentation to help with design, but we're also trying to communicate that it benefits everybody, not just that architect. So when you're selling it, yes, you're trying to sell an architect saying, I can provide services for construction documentation, but you also need to let them know that it's valuable to the building owner, it's valuable to the contractor, valuable to all the subs.
But somebody has to pay. Somebody has to pay for it. And exactly. I could imagine that part of our presentations as visual storytellers is to say, this is the kind of tool that will help you win more business, to win that commission to do the design, because these are the tools that or the construction, these are the tools that you're using to help your client save time, save money, and to be part of the process so things don't get designed that then have to be, things don't get built that have to get unbuilt because a mistake was made during construction.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you talked about turning this over to a client. There were a couple of words that you used. Test fit. Can you talk about test fit first?
Test fits it's more in commercial real estate, where a commercial real estate broker is trying to find tenants for buildings, and they'll go through this formal process called a test fit to figure out, and again, we're talking bigger spaces. It's not your 5,000, 10,000, 25,000 square foot office, but I have 500 people and I'm trying to rent this space. Is 500 people going to work for me?
I was actually thinking I have a $3 million piece of equipment, and before I ship it from Asia to the United States, I want to actually know that piece of equipment's going to fit.
Well, yeah, that isn't what the test fit means in the commercial real estate world. But again, all of this could be used for exactly what you're talking about on technical projects. So.
Okay. And then I think you were starting to talk a little bit about all the digital assets being turned over to the property management company? And
it would be to whoever paid for the system.
Yeah.
So, and then that can be turned over to anybody. But yeah, it's a complete export of everything you see in the player, and it can run on a desktop.
So that when the water starts flooding, when there's an electrical problem where you need to know what's behind the drywall,
you would have access to that.
because
So-
you have the visualization during the progress of construction. And I would imagine that sometimes when the architect has called for infrastructure to be in X place, it ends up in Y place during the build. And so the typical part is you start opening up drywall to go find what you're looking for, as opposed to now you know exactly where it is.
Exactly. Yes.
Okay. Can you take us to, are we up to the showing, just, I want to see that BIM model again.
Okay. And that's the next step here. So part of the comparison is the BIM model. Now, one of the things, actually, what's interesting about this project was I actually assisted with the creation of the as-built BIM model before I started with CUPIX. And I was using, and a part of the testing I always do, I'm always testing the latest, greatest. And I was using a mobile LiDAR scanning system to see how well it would work on this project, and didn't do very well. And unfortunately found myself with a laser measure, tape measure, taking dimensions, which really isn't what I wanted to be doing. But it's also, my involvement with this project. Not that I do the BIM modeling, I have people overseas that help me with that. But what you're seeing is the original as-built BIM model. We're working on demos. I have an email to the architect, send me the latest BIM model so that you can actually see side by side, not just the existing phase, the new phase, show me where the wall should be and everything else. But you get a general idea of the capabilities of that, of being able to dynamically see what you're seeing is the as built and as designed.
And what I think we're also seeing, and help me understand this, but when we're looking at the BIM model designed in Revit, REVIT, that the BIM is generally done, I want to say, in 5 sections. Is that right?
What do you mean by 5 sections?
Oh, here's the electrical. Here's the plumbing.
By trade, yes. So
by trade.
Yeah. So not everybody does it within 3D. Kind of depends upon the project. Your architects, even with architects, not everybody will do it in 3D, but if they're using Revit, typically they're taking the time to get it into 3D appropriately.
So if we're talking about in Revit, then and it's in a 3D model, then in all likelihood that it's in layers by trade.
Correct.
So the one who's doing the drywall versus the electrical versus the plumbing.
And what we're working on, and there's, this just came out, this whole BIM integration, but we're working on some ability to change visibility dynamically within the model to make this even more useful for everybody on the project team. So for example here, hey, turn off structural columns, or, I don't have any mechanical, electrical, but you would see the different trades by object types within the model. So I could go through and say, hey, make my walls transparent, and I want to see what's behind them in the BIM model. Or highlight the mechanical ducts red. And again, dynamically do that while you're looking at this model.
Yeah, to me, Paul, this is amazing. When Scott first showed this to me when Scott showed this to me last week, really the only words that came to mind, was magic. That the ability to compare time frames, the ability to compare to BIM model, just to me seemed amazing. What again, I want to ask the question I asked earlier is, why does this matter? It looks fantastic as a layperson. I go, wow, look at that. I can see this is where the work is today. This is what was originally envisioned. The question is, why is this important to any of the trades, architects, engineers, client, owner, leaser?
Well, I mean, from the construction process, it's, again, I wish I had a little bit better BIM model example here, but if I had the BIM model with electrical, structural, mechanical, you're going to be able to potentially highlight or spot problems before they occur. So the mechanical ducting, that's just in the wrong place. They installed it incorrectly just by visual inspection. That's one of the biggest advantages, to be able to visually see, again, what was designed versus what was built, and catch those problems before they occur. Anytime you can catch those problems earlier on, you're saving money on the project.
It's amazing. Scott, of those in this space, or Paul, that you've showed this to, what's been their reaction?
I mean, I think people are pretty blown away just on the idea behind everything that we're doing.
Your adjectives and adverbs are the best so far, but yeah, really impressed by what we've been able to do here in such a short time.
Yeah, I mean, we may be taking this for granted, but you know, as far as I know, this is on WGAN-TV Live at 5. This is the first time that CUPIX is showing publicly the side-by-side comparison of a 3D tour in a time frame and a 3D tour to the BIM model. And to me, this looks incredibly exciting. That's why I just think of it as magic, because it seems like a very natural way to look at something, as opposed to scattered pictures. Or frankly, I could imagine that an architect in one location could be reviewing projects in multiple cities without getting on a plane.
Yes, very much. And I should state that, this is all available if people are on CUPIX, but I should also state we don't have very good documentation on this yet. So, everything's public beta right now. Everything's free. But I would recommend, as we get our documentation together, shoot us an email, let us know what type of project you're working on, and we'll direct you in a certain way on capturing the space. There is some initial setup of the system to be able to align your reality model with the floor plan and align with your BIM model. Just requires just some initial coordination to make that happen. And we have tools to make that easy, but you need to think about that before you get too far, and then you have to change it. But it is fairly easy to configure and administer. So.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, before we get to questions, and I know we have at least one member that's in our virtual studio audience, our lounge, that's going to be joining us for some questions. And I had some questions too. What else would you like to show us today?
Scott, I think you were going to do a wrap up. Oh, you're muted,
Just
Scott.
a brief wrap up on my side in terms of sharing the screen. Yeah.
Did you still want? Did you want to share screen?
Yeah. Just okay. Real quick. It's available now. Like Paul said, if you got big sites, you can achieve this this level of return on a camera that you can get from Fry's Electronics or at the Apple Store or Microsoft Store or online at Amazon. So huge AEC sites, you can do those really fast. And we've got the offline viewer, the CPX viewer.
That's amazing. Paul took us through that, and I think he just assumed, well, of course we would have a way to export all our data and you could have it forever and it's not going to cost you for hosting or something. So to me, that is huge. That is a big deal. The fact that we can turn over everything to a client is just, to me, is just amazing.
Yeah, and that's a big deal for archiving. If you want to keep it live, that's the best. It's the best way to keep it live. You can view it on mobile. You can open up your phone and just access it anywhere securely. But if you need to have it offline, if you're doing a nuclear site or something that just shouldn't really be online, it should be a little bit more secure. Or for project closeout, the CPX viewer and exporting the file is a big deal. So it's an offline exportable format. So we're really excited about that, and that's a key need for this industry and a lot of other industries for that matter. And then and as Paul's mentioned, when you're ready for a big site, you can do what we're showing right here. Just reach out to us. We'll give you the latest best practice. If you're looking at this this video today, what Paul mentioned is basically the best practice. But a week from now, a month from now, you know, it might slightly change. But more than likely, we'll have the documentation online. So if you're ready for a big site, check our documentation or reach out to us to get the best practice.
Okay, terrific. Anything else at the moment?
No.
I'm gonna see if we can bring Leon. Leon's been patiently sitting in our green room, and I think he had some questions that you wanted to ask. Hey, Leon, good to see you. Leon, can you hear us okay?
Can you hear me?
Yep, great. You had some questions for Scott or Paul?
You're just catching me munching on a biscuit here, having some tea.
All right, so I'll do a little introduction while you finish there. Leon is a member of the We Get Around Network Forum. He's in the UK, and he does deep dives into any and everything 360 related. And so he's particularly interested in what CUPIX has been up to. Leon, did you have some, maybe you had an observation first and then maybe some questions for Paul and Scott?
Well, Paul, Scott, amazing work. I was just thinking, yeah, what shall I compare it to? And it reminds me when I was a youngster and watching the first moon landing. And I get the same sort of feeling, the same sort of excitement. It's technology that is incredible. One of the challenges here in the UK is that there's a lot of old buildings without any existing plans available. And that is quite a big challenge in capturing the information and generating plans. Plans that were there is not, it's somewhere misplaced or whatever. What is the best practice to actually generate a plan from
Excuse me, Scott, could you take it off screen sharing for us?
Yeah, I sure can.
Thank you.
So I guess I'll take that. Now, CUPIX today isn't, you know, for really large sites, isn't the best thing to base your construction documents off of in terms of how we capture the 3D mesh. You're going to want to actually get other other information. There could be things we do in the future to help with that. But I'm familiar with a lot of the other ways people are doing things, and a lot of times people are doing it hand measuring, laser measures, tape measures. Other options are, high definition laser scanning, and that gets just very expensive. So I can't say I necessarily have the best thing for you today, but maybe we might be able to do more in the future on that. I don't know if I answered it.
No, I've come to the same sort of conclusion. I thought maybe there was a little bit of additional magic here.
I'll add a couple of comments on how that workflow might work, and we are seeing that workflow going from a CUPIX tour to a floor plan being done today, just not on the larger sites, because it's hard to maintain the accuracy over very, very large sites, very, very large site, and there's better ways to measure a large site. But that is to use I use the auto sketched floor plan that we're generating from CUPIX. So that etched in line represents more than just a single cross section. It really represents 3D space taken from multiple continuous cross sections that's projected down onto a floor plan. So there's ability to leverage that today to build floor plans. And when you need a more precise measurement, you can introduce a more precise measurement with tape or laser or a couple of other methods. But that more than likely would be, if something comes to the surface for really big sites, it's going to be a workflow along those lines, which is being put in practice today.
And on a side note, even people that are using high definition laser scanners, so be it Faro, Leica, they're still using ours for the visual information also as supplementary. If any of you have ever worked with a point cloud from those systems before, it's not very easy to work with. So, and it's what you'll find is in terms of a delivery, the point cloud, very few people can actually work at that point cloud. Everybody can work with a CUPIX 3D tour. So it's very complementary to those laser scanning systems.
Leon, did you have other questions?
No, not really.
Okay, Paul, I seem to recall at the top of the show you might was there a camera that you wanted to tell us about, that you had a preferred camera that you were surprisingly that you preferred one over another?
You know, I use so many that I found myself for stills using the Sphere for interval photos, just because it's the highest resolution. You can do it fast and high resolution. And I went back just yesterday. I was using the Ricoh Theta, and it did a great job too. Ricoh Theta V. We're flexible, so.
Okay, cool. So I want to just give you kind of a summary of my impressions, because I think what CUPIX is doing is disruptive in such great ways. My takeaways from today's show, probably I think I want to count maybe 5 things that just blew me away. First, that you can take the 3D tour and in a side-by-side comparison over a time interval. So progress, here's what happened, which has happened in a week, in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks, in 5 weeks, and see progress. The second takeaway is that you can compare on the screen, split screen, to look at the BIM model. And that kind of blows me away. The third is the speed of capture that's possible first with the interval shooting, and then second using the video with time lapse mashed up with the videogrammetry that we learned about in our previous WGAN TV show with Scott. So the fact that you can do a 120,000 square foot 5-level building and rooftop in, correct me if I'm wrong, I want to say it was about 2.5 hours walking through the space.
2.5 hours.
2.5 hours for we are show. Our show is for the We Get Around Network community, our forum community. 10,000 plus Matterport photographers, Google Street View photographers. We're used to things taking call it an hour, maybe to scan 1,000 feet in an hour, or maybe 2 or 3 times faster, maybe in a commercial space, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about a magnitude of 10 times faster, 20 times faster to scan spaces. To me, it's absolutely beyond words of how using videogrammetry without a fancy camera. I think that's probably the fourth thing, is that you're able to use any off-the-shelf 360 camera from $130 to whatever you want to pay camera, but can produce super nice results for a camera that's about $350, certainly less than $500, that you can be doing amazing capture of an. I'm just struggling with the words, because it's I think as Leon said, this is he was talking about, this was like watching a rocket ship for the first time, walking on the moon for the first time. My words was always like magical, because it's just that easy. So and then I think the last thing, I think I'm up to 5, was the fact that all of this record, the entire record, can be exported and played on So there's no hosting forever required. And then, if we're all lucky enough to do a nuclear reactor or some crazy space where there's some issues about it not being displayed publicly and hosted online, that there's ways to offline this, that it never needs to be public.
Just a quick point on that public privacy item. So all of the tours that we're creating, this is very important for the industries that we're working in, all the tours that we're creating are by default private. So I can share with you, I could share with Leon, I could share with Paul, and I could revoke access to Paul, Leon, and yourself as needed. It's only when you decide to make a tour public and post it on the WGAN Forum, like we hope to do here soon, does it become public. So I wanted to make that distinction.
So it gets processed in the cloud. Does that mean your support people have access to see what's being processed?
We're providing B2B private service, so it's a business and a business. So we're not, we don't have access to the cloud data. We're not. It's what you control is private, is yours. If you decide to share it with our support team, and you submit a ticket and say, hey, we need some help with this tour, then we'll ask for access. And then once we have access, then we can start taking a look around. So
I would actually have to grant you access to the tour in order for you to help me. That would be the process, correct? Process. So we have this whole issue of security. Wow, that's really exciting. So anyway, so when I think about what you've showed today, and Scott, what you've showed to us on 2 previous WGAN TV Live at 5 shows, I'm just like blown away. I just think that as excited that as we've all been about perhaps a Matterport solution. I know in the forum we've had so many discussions about, hey, I got a Matterport camera. I have an opportunity to scan 50,000 square feet, 100,000 square feet, and I always think, well, you got to use the right. Just because you have a tool doesn't mean it's the right tool. You got to use the right tool for the right occasion, and I think part of what you've shown today, that if you're talking about construction sites, commercial spaces that are easily can be 50,000, 100,000 square feet, a million square feet, and there's a need for not just capturing it once, but capturing the progress from BIM model to delivery to the client. This is like so crazy exciting. I mean, you have something that's magic. Paul, I think you should probably go back to Simon and let him know that you've added tens of millions of dollars in value to the CUPIX ecosystem by introducing the importance of the AEC. I mean, you knew CUPIX had magic, but the magic really is 10x or 100x as soon as you introduce the AEC space to it. Yeah. So,
and there's always been a space between, kind of that limit to Matterport, and beyond that, these large sites, people are using high definition laser scanning that's very, very expensive, very, very slow. So we really saw it as there's this need, kind of this in between the Matterport and these higher end systems, like even a NavViz system that I've used before. It's an expensive system, and you don't always necessarily want to pay that much money, and we're kind of filling that niche. So.
Yeah, quite amazing. So someplace between I need precision accuracy scanning of a space because I got some very important engineering decision, so I'm going to pay for someone that's got $100,000 precision scanner or more, versus I'm going to use Matterport. You've said essentially where you can scan huge amounts of spaces, and what am I trying to say here? I think is that for a Matterport photographer, that you got to buy a 360 camera and make sure that 360 camera captures video. And CUPIX, CUPIX.com today is in beta. It doesn't cost anything. So, and then I think, Paul, you're gonna send us the info on the how you attach to a hard hat, what device. I really super geeky, but I want to know, how do I attach my selfie pole or
it's like $10.
I know, but send me the link. I'm telling you, there's people in the forum who are going to say, I want to know how to attach my my 360 camera to my hard hat so that I can walk the space.
Well, yeah, it's like a $10 hard hat and $10 worth of equipment. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So anyway, very exciting. Let's do a little selfie shot for our little screen capture. Scott, Paul, we got thumbs up, big smile. Good. We'll use that for our little screenshot. So, and unless you all had something else, Scott, thank you so much. We have you on mute
Scott's
there.
Muted.
Scott,
Great. Thanks for having us. I'm glad that the link that we showed you resonated and that you had us on. Really appreciate it. Dan.
great. And Paul, thank you. Very appreciate you being on the show today.
Thanks. And hopefully we'll see you at the end of next month here in San Francisco.
Sounds great. And Leon, always good visiting with you from the UK. And thank you for adding to the show. I know this was a topic that you've been, well, in fact, Leon and I think we had probably a full hour discussion just on this topic. So we're really excited about it. And for all of you, thanks for tuning in. You've been watching WGAN TV Live at 5. We've recorded today's show. If you missed any portion of it, we will put it in the We Get Around Network forum. If you're watching on YouTube, it's WGAN-TV.com. We'll post the video in the We Get Around Network forum. Thanks again for tuning in. Okay, great. Scott and Paul, if you could stay on the line for a second. Leon, thanks. If you want to drop off, that'd be great. And let me make sure I just stop